The mirror in the master bedroom stood tall and wide, gifted by Christopher after their wedding. Framed in smooth gold and set against a slate-gray wall, it reflected the kind of life Juliana once only saw in movies, the soft white comforter, the velvet chair in the corner, and the silk robe that clung to her curves. But tonight, she didn't see elegance in the glass. She saw stretch marks curving like rivers across her belly. She saw soft arms that used to be firm. She saw a woman who gave birth to 3 children, all at once, and never quite returned to herself. Juliana touched her stomach, not with shame, but with an ache that came from memory. A time when her skin was taut and her waist moved like music. She let the robe slip from her shoulder and studied the way her body settled into itself now, fuller, slower, quieter. Behind her, the door creaked open. Christopher stepped in, loosening his tie, the quiet confidence of a man who had never known scarcity. He tossed his suit jacket over a chair and caught her eyes in the mirror. "You're up late," he said gently. "I couldn't sleep," Juliana replied, tightening her robe. He walked up behind her and kissed her shoulder, softly, lovingly. But when his hand slid around her waist, she stiffened. Not on purpose. Just, naturally. He noticed. Christopher pulled back slowly, not offended, but confused. "Did I do something wrong?" She turned to face him and smiled, faintly. "No. It's not you." "Then talk to me." Juliana swallowed. I don't feel like me right now." He looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded. "Okay. I understand." He didn't try to fix it. He just reached for her hand and said, "I'm here when you're ready." And that should have made it easier. But it didn't. Because even though Christopher loved her, sometimes love wasn't enough to erase the distance that crept in after diapers and business calls and exhaustion. Their passion hadn't disappeared. It had simply paused. She wanted to feel wanted. But more than that, she wanted to feel worthy of being wanted again. The next morning, the house buzzed with noise. Lila spilled cereal across the counter. Liam ran through the living room in mismatched socks. Leo screamed for help zipping his jacket. Christopher helped the boys while Juliana wrapped Lila's hair into 3 tight puffs. It was beautiful chaos. But it left no room for kisses in the hallway or whispered touches near the sink. At school drop-off, Juliana leaned back in the car seat inside. She looked at Christopher, who was typing something into his phone. He paused. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated. "Do you think I've changed, too much?" He glanced at her, surprised. "What kind of question is that?" "I mean physically." Christopher set the phone down and turned toward her. "You gave me 3 children. You held our family together while I disappeared. You built a business from nothing. The only thing I think about is how lucky I am you still want to share a bed with me." Her throat tightened. "Then why don't we act like it?" Silence fell. And that silence said more than any fight could. He took her hand. "Then let's do something. Just us." She shook her head. "I'm not ready for a night out." "Then we stay in. But let me love you again. All of you." That afternoon, Lady Eleanor Marcus arrived uninvited. As always. Wearing a pale cream suit and sunglasses even indoors, she glided into the house with the grace of an old money queen and the coldness of one too. "I was in the area," she said. "Thought I'd stop by. I see the house hasn't changed much." Juliana smiled politely. "Hello, Mom." Christopher was upstairs with the boys. Eleanor took a slow glance around the kitchen. "And how's the boutique?" "Busy. We're preparing for a fashion tech conference in Cape Town." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "So still playing with fabric?" Juliana bit her tongue. "Building a business," she said calmly. Eleanor sat at the table. "Juliana, I say this with love. Marriage is not a runway. You've had your wedding. Now focus on your role. The home. Your husband. The Marcus legacy. Juliana folded her arms. My legacy is more than your last name. The two women locked eyes. And though no voice was raised, the tension spoke volumes. Eleanor stood and smoothed her sleeve. Christopher deserves a partner who uplifts him, not competes with him. But perhaps I expected too much. She turned and left without another word. Juliana sat there, shaking, not from fear, but from fury. And from something else too. Doubt. That night, Juliana opened her laptop and searched for home workouts. Something simple. Something quiet. Not for weight loss. For power. She tied a wrapper around her waist and played Aces, Fire on the Mountain. Her feet moved in rhythm, slow and steady. She closed her eyes and let the music carry her. Christopher stood by the door watching, not as a husband trying to interrupt, but as a man seeing his wife awaken. The next morning, he left a note on her pillow. I see you. I always have. But I love that you're starting to see yourself again too. It started with a feeling, one Juliana couldn't explain. Not quite loneliness. Not quite restlessness either. Something quieter. Deeper. A quiet whisper beneath her skin, find your spark again. She stood barefoot in the bedroom early one morning, waist wrapped in a light blue Ankara scarf. Sun peeking through the curtains. The house was still. The triplets hadn't stirred yet, and Christopher had gone to the gym. She turned on her phone and opened a dance video, a slow, graceful waist movement set to a soft talking drum rhythm. She copied it. Not perfectly. But enough to smile. Then she did it again. And again. By the end of the week, Juliana had cleared a corner of the bedroom, rolled up a rug, and created her own quiet dance space. A candle. A playlist. A mirror. And most important, her old waist beads. She hadn't worn them since the twins were toddlers. She picked them up from a small jewelry box, running her fingers over the colors. Gold. Deep green. Coral. They still smelled faintly of the body oil she used to wear. She tied them around her waist slowly, reverently. When she saw them against her skin, she smiled. There I am. Christopher noticed the change, not just in her body, but in her energy. She laughed more easily. Moved more fluidly. Frequent, lingering at the collarbone or the base of his neck. One afternoon, he followed the scent of pepper soup into the kitchen. She stood barefoot in her wrapper, chopping green scent leaves, waist beads peeking from under her crop top. He leaned against the wall, watching. You're staring, she said without turning. I'm married to a goddess, he said. I'm allowed. She smiled but said nothing. That night, she texted him from upstairs. Come to me. No suit. Just your heart. And appetite. Christopher climbed the stairs barefoot, wearing a t-shirt and gray sweatpants. The bedroom was dimly lit, soft music floating in the background, Aces, the beginning. Juliana stood by the window, her back to him, wrapped in silk and candlelight. On the bed sat a tray, jollof rice with fried plantain, dodo gizzard, and a small bowl of zobo sorbet. You cooked all this? He asked, stepping closer. I wanted to remind you of something, she said. What's that? She turned to face him. Her eyes glowed, her waist beads shimmered in the light. That I'm not just the mother of your children. I'm still the woman you kissed like the world might end tomorrow. He swallowed hard. She walked to him, took his hand, and placed it on her waist. Do you feel that? She whispered. Yes. That's me. The woman you chose. The woman who still burns for you. His breath caught in his throat. He kissed her, slowly, fully, like she was new. They danced first, nothing rehearsed. Just slow movement. Hands. Eyes. Quiet laughter between touches. Deep love knows. There was no rush. No need to prove anything. Just warmth. Connection. Reconnection. Christopher pulled her close. "I missed this you," he said softly. "I missed me too." He lifted her chin. "You're incredible, Jules. With or without waist beads. But thank you, for reminding me." She smiled. "Thank you, for noticing." Outside, the city was still. The candles burned low. And in that room, in their marriage, something had come alive again. The night was velvet soft. Juliana stood in the garden, barefoot in her silk robe, a steaming mug of ginger tea in hand. Crickets whispered in the dark hedges. Inside, Christopher was reading to the boys, and Lila had fallen asleep on the couch with a half-colored drawing still clutched in her hand. Peace. But peace, Juliana had learned, was often the quiet before something else. Her phone buzzed. It was Naomi. "You're going to want to be at the Empress Gala. Cassandra is on the guest list. She's back in London." Juliana's lips tightened. It had been 4 years. No calls. No photos. Just quiet. And now. The Empress Gala was London's most high-profile charity event of the season. Politicians. Celebrities. Billionaires. And Juliana, standing at the entrance in a velvet gold floor-length dress she designed herself, wearing her confidence like armor. Christopher walked beside her in a sleek black tuxedo, hand at the small of her back. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered. "Power couple," someone muttered. "Nigerian elegance," another said. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and floral arches. A jazz quartet played softly. The smell of champagne and over-scented perfume filled the air. Juliana spotted Naomi at the far end, raising a glass and nodding toward a tall figure descending the stairs. Cassandra. And she looked good. Black dress. High slit. Red lipstick. The kind of elegance that dared you to compare. She glided down the staircase like she owned it. When her eyes met Juliana's, she smiled, slow, cool, polished. She made her way to them. "Christopher," Cassandra said, voice honeyed. "It's been a long time." Christopher's jaw tensed. "Cassandra. And you must be Juliana," she added, eyes scanning her. "I've heard a lot, and seen even more." Juliana kept her voice calm. "You've seen enough to come back." Cassandra tilted her head. "Sometimes what's unfinished has a way of finding its way home." Before Juliana could respond, Cassandra leaned in just a little too close. "I came with someone important," she whispered. "A young boy. Smart. Quiet. Beautiful eyes. He reminds me of someone." Christopher frowned. "What are you saying?" Cassandra smiled. "I think we need to talk. Privately." Juliana stepped forward. "No. If there's something to say it here." Cassandra dropped her smile. "I had a child, Christopher. He's 7. And the dates line up." Silence. For a moment, the noise of the gala dimmed. Juliana's heart stuttered. She looked at her husband, who stared back at Cassandra, stunned. "Don't want drama," Cassandra added. "I just want truth." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking like punctuation. Juliana stood frozen. Back home, the silence in their car felt heavier than any argument. In the bedroom. Juliana slowly removed her earrings and placed them in a velvet box. "She's lying," Christopher said finally. "I swear on everything, Jules. If that child's mine, I didn't know." Juliana looked at him, not with anger, but with hurt. "She said the dates match. I didn't sleep with her after I met you. And before that, we weren't even speaking. Then get a DNA test." He nodded. "I will." Juliana walked past him and crawled into bed. "Until then," she said softly, "we parent our children, we live in this house, but I need space." Christopher sat on the edge of the bed, eyes on the floor. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. Juliana turned her face to the wall. "Then fight for me with truth." That night, neither of them slept much. And somewhere across the city, Cassandra stood by a hotel window, a glass of wine in hand, staring down at the lights below. Behind her, a child sat on the floor, playing with toy blocks. She smiled faintly and whispered to herself, "Let's see what truth brings home." The silence had settled into the house like fog. Not heavy enough to choke, but thick enough to feel. Christopher had already left early for the office, after kissing the top of Juliana's head while she pretended to be asleep. She wasn't. She just didn't know what to say, and sometimes silence felt safer than small talk. Juliana poured herself a cup of warm lemon water and stood at the kitchen window. The garden looked the same. The sunlight still danced on the patio. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't angry, not yet. But she was protective. Of her peace. Of her children. Of the world she had built from scratch. The memory of Cassandra's voice still echoed in her head, "He reminds me of someone." That afternoon, Juliana stood at the center of her boutique, surrounded by fabric samples, pattern books, and the soft hum of a sewing machine in the background. She tried to lose herself in work. It used to help. But today, her hands couldn't find their rhythm. Naomi entered, dressed in soft pastels, hair swept into a scarf. She looked concerned. "I heard," she said gently. Juliana raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" "She told someone who told someone." "Of course she did. Cassandra doesn't whisper. She performs." Juliana let out a small laugh, bitter and dry. "It was a show. And I was front row." Naomi walked over and wrapped her arms around her. "Do you believe her?" "I believe the past has teeth," Juliana said. "But I also believe Christopher's trying. So I told him, take the test. No begging. No drama. Just facts." Naomi stepped back. "That's the most Juliana thing I've ever heard. Calm. Controlled. Terrifying." Juliana smiled weakly. "If I fall apart, Naomi, who's going to hold the center?" That evening, Christopher returned home quietly. The kids were already in pajamas. Lila and Leo sat drawing at the kitchen table while Liam recited Bible verses to himself, humming between lines. Juliana was wiping down the stove when Christopher placed a small box on the counter. She turned slowly. "What's that?" she asked. "The test. I've arranged the sample and the paperwork. All done." She nodded once. "Good. I also brought you this." He pulled out a small bouquet, wildflowers, not roses. She had once told him she preferred them. He remembered. Juliana didn't take them. Instead, she said, "Leave them on the table. I'll put them in water later." Christopher's eyes softened, but he didn't push. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Just patience. And belief." Juliana looked at him, her voice low. "I'm not punishing you, Christopher. I'm protecting myself from drowning while you figure out where you stand." He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. "I'm still here. We're not ending. But I'm not pouring into something that hasn't proved it can hold me. He nodded. Do you still love me? He asked quietly. She took a breath. Yes. But love doesn't exempt you from accountability. Then she walked away, slowly, calmly, with dignity that filled the room like incense. Later that night, Christopher sat on the edge of their bed, wildflowers now placed in a small vase on his side of the nightstand. He looked at her sleeping form, or pretending to sleep form, and whispered. I love you, Jules. And I'll wait for the truth. Then I'll win you back. From her side, Juliana kept her eyes closed, but her lips moved slightly. We'll see. Juliana stepped into her boutique the next morning, wearing her armor, a flowy beige kaftan with bold red embroidery, a head wrap that hugged her crown like a halo, and silence as her shield. But silence doesn't stop hurt. It just makes it echo louder. Naomi was waiting for her, perched on the edge of the cutting table, legs crossed, phone in hand, eyes bright. I have news, she said with a grin. Juliana raised a brow. Good or dramatic? Naomi held up her left hand. A diamond, soft but elegant, sparkled from her finger. Juliana blinked. You're engaged. Naomi nodded, nearly giddy. He proposed last night at the rooftop restaurant near South Bank. There was jazz, Jules. A whole saxophone. Juliana smiled, genuinely. I'm happy for you. Naomi tilted her head. You don't look it. I'm just tired. Cassandra's claim, it's a storm I wasn't prepared for. Naomi's smile faltered. That's fair. And I didn't want to add more, but... Juliana looked up. But what? Naomi lowered her voice. The man I'm marrying, his name is Desmond Afolabi. He's Cassandra's legal representative. The silence in the room went sharp. Juliana stood still. You're engaged to the man handling Cassandra's case. Naomi rushed to explain. He told me after we'd been seeing each other for a few weeks. And I didn't know how to tell you because I didn't want you to think that you were on her side. Juliana finished, her voice flat. Naomi looked wounded. No, Jules. I would never betray you. I love you. You're my sister. Juliana sat down on the low stool by her sewing machine. Her fingers hovered over the fabric. I just wish, she whispered, you had told me before you said yes. I didn't plan this. No. But you protected it. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. Please don't let this come between us. Juliana looked up. It already has. That night, Juliana didn't talk to Christopher. She just sat in the bathtub until the water turned lukewarm, her fingers wrinkled, her skin soft from silence. She thought about love, how it could feel like fire, then fade to fog. She thought about loyalty, how people wrapped it in romance and called it forgiveness. And she thought about friendship, how the closest hearts sometimes made the deepest cuts. Later, Christopher knocked lightly on the bathroom door. You okay? I'm fine, she said, not meaning it. Want tea? She didn't respond. He paused. The test will be back in 3 days. Still, she said nothing. But after the water drained and the lights dimmed, she slipped under the covers and whispered one word. Okay. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of not knowing if the child Cassandra brought into the spotlight was truth or manipulation. 3 days of silence with Naomi. 3 days of holding her children a little longer at night, hoping their world wouldn't shake. 3 days of rehearsing how to forgive, or how to walk away. The envelope arrived at 10:27 a.m. It was cream-colored, official, and far too quiet for the storm it carried. Juliana sat at the kitchen island, a plain white mug of tea cooling beside her untouched. She stared at the envelope without reaching for it. For a full 5 minutes, she simply looked. Christopher came down the stairs, still in his white t-shirt and joggers, barefoot and uncertain. "It's here," she said softly, not looking up. He nodded, moved to sit across from her, and placed both palms flat on the table. "Do you want me to open it?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'll do it." Her fingers trembled, but she tore the edge neatly. She pulled out the folded sheet, eyes scanning line by line until they stopped. Then she read it again. And again. Silence. Thick. Suspended. Then. "He's not yours," she said. A pause. Juliana exhaled. A long, slow release of something she didn't know she'd been holding. Christopher reached for her hand, but she gently pulled away. "She lied," he whispered, almost in disbelief. "She wanted to shake me," Juliana said. And she did. Naomi arrived later that day. She entered the boutique with soft steps and eyes full of apology. "I heard," she said. Juliana didn't stop sketching. "That she lied?" Naomi nodded. "I'm so sorry." Juliana set down her pencil. "This could have broken my home." She knew what she was doing. Naomi reached out. "And I didn't. I should have warned you. I was afraid you'd think I chose her." Juliana looked her in the eye. "You didn't choose her. But you didn't choose me either. Not when it mattered." A beat passed between them. Full. Heavy. Sad. Then Juliana stepped forward and hugged her. "I'm still angry," she whispered. "But I miss you." Naomi held her tighter. "I'll wait. And I'll earn it." That night, Christopher set the table himself. No chef. No catered dinner. Just a simple bowl of yam porridge with smoked fish, the way Juliana liked it growing up. When she came downstairs, barefoot in a wrapper, he stood and pulled out her chair. "I wanted to feed you," he said. "Not to fix things. Just to thank you, for not walking away." She sat slowly, watching him closely. "I still don't trust easily," she said. "Not yet." "I'll earn that," he replied. "Every day if I have to." They ate in silence for a while. But the silence was different now. Not broken. Not tense. It was rebuilding. Later, when the kids were asleep, Christopher found Juliana in the garden, arms folded, head tilted toward the stars. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her waist. "No more tests," he said softly. "No more lies. No more secrets," she replied. He kissed her temple. And for the first time in days, she leaned back into him. Not because everything was okay. But because she knew she wouldn't have to carry it alone anymore. It began with a folded piece of paper left on Juliana's pillow. A note in Christopher's handwriting, slanted and deliberate. "You've been carrying everything, even me. Let me carry you today. Just say yes. 4 p.m. Be ready. Wear something soft. I've got the rest." Juliana stared at the note, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Something in her heart softened, not completely, but enough to say, "Okay. Let's try." At 4 p.m., Juliana walked into the living room dressed in a long, flowing blush-tone dress with a subtle slit. Her braids were gathered in a low bun, and her waist beads peeked faintly beneath the fabric when she moved. Christopher stood waiting. Crisp white shirt, no tie, soft brown slacks, holding a picnic basket and 2 folded chairs. She raised an eyebrow. "We're not going far, are we?" He smiled. "No. We're going home." They drove 5 minutes to a small park on the edge of the neighborhood, a quiet space with wide trees, gentle hills, and a view of the sunset. He spread out a checkered blanket, placed soft pillows on the grass, and opened the basket, roasted chicken wings, suya, fried yam, zobo in 2 glass jars, and puff-puff tucked into a napkin. She blinked. "You did all this?" "I bribed our housekeeper," he admitted. "But the thought was mine." She laughed, full and light. The sound warmed him. They sat under the tree, shoes off, breeze cool against their skin. For a while, they just ate, shared stories from before they met, and laughed at the memory of the night their son Liam tried to flush a mango seed to plant it in the ocean. Then Christopher grew quiet. "I've been holding something back," he said. "Because I didn't know if I had the right to say it anymore." Juliana looked at him, a piece of suya paused halfway to her mouth. "Say what?" "That I want to love you again." Loudly. Without fear. "I want to flirt with you in the hallway. Kiss your neck in the kitchen. Take photos of you when you're not looking." She lowered her eyes, heart pounding. "I miss being in love with you in public," he added. "Not just as my wife. But as Juliana Vega, the woman who ruined me in the best way." She smiled gently. "I never stopped loving you. But did you stop feeling desired?" Juliana looked up, eyes glassy. "Yes," she admitted. "Sometimes I felt like a shadow with a schedule." Christopher scooted closer, reached for her hand. "Then let me change that. Let me love you in a way that echoes, not just in this house, but outside of it. I want to be your lover again. Not just your partner. Not just daddy." She placed her palm over his. "Start now," she whispered. He leaned in, kissed her knuckles, then her cheek, then her collarbone. The world went quiet again. But this time, the quiet was full of warmth. Later that night, they returned home. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet. Christopher pulled her into the hallway, pressed her gently like they hadn't been married for years. Juliana kissed, not because it was familiar, but because it felt new again. It was a Wednesday morning when Juliana found it, a folded piece of yellow construction paper, tucked carefully between the pages of her sketchbook. She wouldn't have seen it, if not for the way it fluttered out when she opened it to look for an old design. She picked it up, thinking it was a note from Naomi, or maybe a child's stray doodle. But when she opened it, 3 blocky, colorful signatures smiled back at her. Lila, Leo, and Liam. Inside, written in messy handwriting with red and blue crayons, was a single sentence. "We miss you smiling together. Please be friends again." A tear fell before she even noticed it. Later that evening, after dinner and cartoons and 3 sleepy heads were tucked into beds, Juliana walked into the bedroom and handed Christopher the letter. He read it silently, lips parting in disbelief. He sat down on the bed, holding the paper like it was glass. "They see everything," he whispered. Juliana sat beside him. "We've been here, but not really present." He turned to her. "Do you want to be?" She looked into his eyes. "I want us to be friends again. Not just parents. Not just married. I want to laugh with you." Christopher touched her face, gently. "Then let's go somewhere. Just us. No phones. No titles." Juliana raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "Somewhere close. Somewhere quiet." They chose a small cabin an hour outside the city. No Wi-Fi. No distractions. Just a fireplace, a stack of old board games, a little lake, and the 2 of them. The first night, they didn't talk much. But they cook together. Laughed when the soup burned. Played Ludo and fought over rules. Fell asleep on the couch with a blanket wrapped around them both. By the second day, something had shifted. Juliana lay in a hammock outside, reading a book, when Christopher sat at her feet and said, "I forgot how to enjoy you." She closed the book. "And I'm remembering now." She smiled and reached for his hand. On the last night, they lit the fireplace, wrapped themselves in sweaters, and talked about everything they had avoided for months. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "But not marrying you." She exhaled. "That's the one thing I've never doubted." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. Starting over. It felt like returning home. Back in the city, the triplets ran into their arms at the front door. "Mummy, Daddy, did you bring snacks?" Juliana laughed, kissing each of them. "Better. We brought our smiles back." Leo grinned. "We knew our letter would work." Christopher scooped him up and whispered, "You saved us." Lila looked proud. "Told you, Liam." And in the middle of a busy living room, full of drawings and toys and noise, Juliana caught Christopher's eye across the room. And smiled. Juliana stood at the entrance of the new flagship boutique, heart pounding, hands pressed together just beneath her chest. The street outside buzzed with anticipation, cameras, stylists, influencers, and family all gathered for one reason. The grand opening of House of Vega London. But her nerves weren't about the guests. They were about the promise. This was more than a store. It was a declaration. A woman once laughed off as, "the girl who got lucky," was now opening a 3-floor fashion house in the heart of London, and doing it under her own name. Naomi approached from behind, looking radiant in a flowing lilac suit. The mayor's assistant just confirmed. "You've got a 5-minute walk-through with the press after your speech." Juliana turned. "And the triplets?" "Liam's eating cupcakes. Lila's pretending to be your bodyguard. Leo is interviewing himself on a pretend mic." They both laughed, full, easy, honest. Naomi took her hand. "You're doing it, Jules. And you're doing it with class." Juliana looked through the boutique glass at the dresses hanging inside. "I just want my children to remember this moment, to know that strength and softness can live in the same woman." Christopher stepped beside her quietly. He wore a traditional agbada, navy blue with silver embroidery. His presence didn't overshadow hers. It simply stood beside it, supportive and proud. "You ready?" he asked. She looked at him, then down at her gold-stitched gown, one she designed herself with threads from old pieces, a neckline from the dress she wore the day they met, lace from the gown she gave birth in, and Ankara fabric from her mother's wrapper. She smiled. More than ever. The ribbon cutting was simple. 3 pairs of small hands helped hold the scissors. And when the ribbon fell, the crowd clapped, not loud, not wild, but warm. The kind of applause meant for someone who earned it without shortcuts. Inside, Juliana gave her speech in a soft voice. She didn't raise it, didn't perform. "I dedicate this space," she said, "to the woman I once was, the mother I became, the designer I fought to become, and the wife who chose to be more than a title." People clapped. Some teared up. And somewhere in the back, Lady Eleanor Marcus, in a dark lace dress and sunglasses, nodded slowly. For the first time. That evening, when the last guests had left, Juliana stood alone inside the boutique. The mannequins stood tall. The lights glowed gently. Her name glimmered above the entrance. Christopher came in, shoes off, tie loosened. He walked up behind her, kissed her shoulder, and whispered. "You built this. Not because you had to. But because you knew who you were before the world saw it." She turned and leaned into him. "This isn't just my house anymore," she said. "It's our forever." And they stood there, hand in hand, in a room full of dresses and dreams. The backyard was glowing with lanterns and laughter. Low music drifted from the speakers, a quiet mix of Nigerian highlife and soft R&B. The triplets danced barefoot on the grass, chasing bubbles and balancing paper crowns on their heads. Friends and family filled the garden, Naomi in a flowing cream dress, Christopher's younger sister holding hands with Lila, and Juliana's mother in a coral lace wrapper, laughing over Puff Puff and Zobo. It wasn't a party. It was a celebration. Of peace. Of presence. Of home. Juliana stood near the patio in a gold and ivory Ankara dress, her waist beads tucked beneath the folds, her feet bare. She watched her life happen in front of her, not on a stage, not in a boardroom, not under lights, but here. In the middle of a garden lit by joy. Christopher walked over, holding a small wine glass. "For the queen of this castle," he said, handing it to her. She took it with a smirk. "Did you toast me in your speech?" He raised an eyebrow. "Twice. You missed it." She chuckled. "Then toast me again." He stepped onto a small stone near the table and raised his voice just enough. "To my wife, the woman who taught me that softness is power, and silence is not weakness. To Juliana, who makes legacy look like lace and leadership feel like love. And to this family, which didn't just survive, it bloomed." Applause. And beneath the lanterns, Juliana blushed like a girl in love for the first time. Later that night, the children were asleep in a pile of pillows on the living room rug. Naomi kissed Juliana's cheek before heading home. Christopher locked the doors, turned out the lights, and joined her on the garden steps, the cool breeze curling around them like a hug. They sat in silence. Not the heavy kind. The kind that feels like breath. Then Juliana leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "We built this." He kissed her forehead. "And we're not done." She looked up, eyes soft with certainty. "No. But this time, we're building it, together." Above them, stars blinked quietly. Inside the house, laughter lingered in the walls. And in that little backyard, between fireflies and half-empty glasses, home wasn't a place. It was a choice. One they would keep making. Every day. Thanks for watching till the next story. Thank you.